Crazy world. It's getting hard to find the lines. Shiver in attempt to define these times. Jitter in effect to hold on to mine. For insanity has always come easy. But it pleases you, then pleases me. Thus I let it be. Soothing to a T. Besides, it gives me time to define these tribes. Where goes the periods when yours is yours and mine is mine? Now yours is mine and mine is mine. The dictators, all of a sudden, they relate. Devised scriptures dictates. They have a clean slate, like the Bible. We hang to the claws like disciples, hoping that you meant what you said to me, that what was mine is meant for me. Only to find out ultimately that we were never in a place of candid. Conversations were mere sensations, watered down condensations, relations reverting to acquaintance, or being misplaced as untimely dedications expired in their effort to relate. Perhaps they could resurrect at a later date, punctuating my grammar with stammer, never to be legit like and hammer. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Poetry Journal Podcast. I am your host, Alex Murdoch, and I'm here with Jay Taylor. And there's Shisha today. Yes.
Hi, I wasn't sure if you were gonna keep going and fresh it.
Yeah.
What's up?
Nah, I just really wanted to go into just say the whole thing twice. The first time just to kind of give people a feel of where I'm coming from, what I'm coming. Perhaps they could get stimulated by, the pre-warm up in a sense. And then I would like to give them like a revisiting. And then hopefully we can kind of put
You too.
discussion into, yeah.
Cool.
Mm. How are you, miss? You good?
Man, it's been a long one today. So battery is on like 0.3% at the moment. So we're running on water and tea today.
What? You're at home, right? What got you charge your thing?
My human battery is on 0.3.
Oh, 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 the human battery. Oh dear.
After that, my phone is fully charged and I'm sitting here
Oh
reading.
dear. Oh, guess what I'm wearing today? I'm ripping the whole
Now she looks something into this prayer, Gavin.
yeah.
That is right.
I'm ripping the old Into the Abyss story series right now. You know.
Good stuff.
Yeah. I remember when I made this shirt, man, I was like, oh my God, I've never seen anything so beautiful in my life.
Yeah. You make a t-shirt and it's like, I have created.
Ah,
You have to go into the archives to find that.
and they'll try. It literally was, I keep it, it's nicely tucked
Mm.
underneath the pillow. Now I'm playing it.
Come on now. Come on now.
No, it's not that deep. But yeah, like I always notified it though. You know, it's cool. But yeah, all right. Let me jump back into this, and I'll say it one more time,
Yes.
and we can.
Chop it up.
Of course, I don't know about heart, so I'm just reciting from a pad with the words written down. So excuse me if I'm looking away from the screen.
Sorry.
Okay, here we go. Crazy world, it's getting hard to find the lines. Shivering attempt to define these times. Jittering effect to hold on to mine. For insanity has always come easy, but it pleases you and then pleases me. Thus, I let it be. Soothing to a T. Besides, it gives me a time to define these trials. Where goes the period when yours is mine? And mine is mine. Now yours is mine. And mine is mine. The dictators, all of a sudden, they relate. Devised scriptures dictates. They have a clean slate, like the Bible. We hang to the claws like disciples, hoping that you meant what you said to me. And what was mine is meant for me, only to find out ultimately that we were never in a place of candid conversations were mere sensations, watered down condensations, relations reverting to acquaintance, or being misplaced as untimely dedications, expired in their effort to relate. Perhaps they could resurrect at a later date, punctuating my grammar with a stammer, never to be legit like arm and hammer. And that was a cut. Yeah, so it's a peculiar quote. It's a little bit different. I'll admit that. But I guess I really want to start with just two questions.
Okay.
Do you believe in old school values? To be my first.
Hmm. In which context?
Just in terms of general, like moral situations you might find yourself in. Do you feel people are like, they have a moral code of old, or is it more like, do you feel like it's more so redefined, it's refined in a sense to more modernized concepts when it comes to situations pertaining to, like, for example, like, you think about a capitalistic society that we live in now, which is kind of like a modern day situation that we have going on. And, it's almost like it dictates different form of code of conduct and like different parameters to really carry yourself within. Do you get what I mean? And
Yeah.
so it had me asking that question, values. What type of values? Old school values. Does it even is that a thing anymore, or is it simply just a relic of the past?
It's so interesting you say that because I think my mind's in two places. I'm thinking on the one hand, yes, those old school values are still here, but they're here as relics. So they kind of,
Yeah,
are sort of like a leftover, an echo.
yeah,
Because I think if people were to actively pause and consider where they learned some of their morals from, where they got some of their values from, or their ideals, they might find it was something that was told to them. And if we were to ask that, they might say the same thing. Oh, it was told to me by my granddad. Oh, he says this. And oh, that person said that. And you might find it's something that maybe no longer is even relevant in this society, but people carry it, pass it down generation by generation, just as even just as sayings, like the early bird gets the worm, that kind of stuff,
yeah,
like some of these things might not actually be uh, necessarily present in a active sense.
mm,
So we have these values now. They may not actually have the value, but have been taught to act upon that value or to
yeah,
act of that value. But if they were to assess themselves and go, well, actually, what are my values? Do I value, I don't know, working from dusk till dawn?
Yeah,
They might come to it and go, well, actually, no, I don't. That's not the way I want to live my life, but that's the way I was taught, and that's the way my family were taught, and or that's the way society encourages me to work. So yeah, I feel like that's a complicated one because the traditional values, I think they're there, but I don't think they're there consciously. I don't think people are purposely trying to keep them around. I think they're stuck.
yeah, yeah. I do get a feeling where there's something you mentioned where it's almost like people these days, when it comes to what they believe in, what they practice,
Mm.
it's kind of like, okay, I got this from my parents, kind of thing. It's kind of like a lineage of people just doing the same thing.
Sort of repeated behaviors and repeated actions, but
Yeah,
actual, individually held beliefs or anything.
yeah, it's kind of like, a generational repetition in a sense where, they're just practicing the same thing. And, it kind of begs the question, like, do people actually think for themselves for the most part?
I mean, I think that's a question that we can almost fairly easily say no to, because I think we can look at the media, we can look at how easily people are influenced by the things that go on
Yeah,
around them. And all you need is for someone to push a narrative, and a large percentage of a population will go along with that narrative, no matter what it is.
yeah,
So I think it's probably more evident that people don't think for themselves if we look at trends and I mean, that's not to insult humanity or anything, but there is
mm,
a certain herd mentality that occurs in humans in general, and
mm,
thinking for yourself generally isn't, even though it's supposed to be encouraged, it's not the
yeah,
thing that's really perpetuated is doing what the masses are doing,
yeah,
like-minded, following some form of line. So whether that's your family, whatever's been passed down to you there, or whether that's going along with whatever society's doing, or whether it's doing what your friends are doing, I
yeah.
don't think people do think for themselves. Not unless, not largely.
I mean, it's kind of consistent um with what you're saying. It's kind of consistent with a sense where, for the most part, I think of it like this because my second question would be, do do they exist anymore? Do they
Mm.
actually exist anymore? And I think when I think about that, there's two things that comes to mind. When you talk about like what we're talking about, the two questions, old school values and people thinking for themselves. I
Mm.
think it's they're a little bit synonymous, just in the sense of like people people utilize or see the value in old
Mm.
school
Mm.
situations, like old school value, I use that word, or the power of thought,
Mm.
individual thought, or like that leadership thing way to thinking. I think they utilize that or see the value of it um when uh when it works for them, when it's convenient. Do you get what I mean?
Yes, I agree. I agree.
It's not like something where they practice over and over. And it's just like what you said about people where there's more sheeps than they are leaders. Everybody's trying to follow, or
Mm.
for the most part, it seems like the majority is trying to follow, while
Mm.
the rest of the people, you might have the few individuals here and there that actually wants to lead the herd or lead themselves to begin with.
Yes.
Do you get
Yeah.
what I mean? And then, like you said, majority are sheep. So eventually you're gonna have a flock that's gonna come and follow you anyway. So I just find that it's very interesting in modern day time that we live in. And
Mm.
because it just seems to me like just observing from afar,
Mm.
for the most part, it seems like morality is a thing that just I know it's out there, but you really have to look hard to find it these days, it seems.
I feel that, and I think
Or just a code in general where like somebody
yes,
actually follows a code. Do you get what I mean?
yeah, I think that's kind of where I was about to head as well, because I think that's exactly what's missing is this kind of consensus that people just follow. You know, we all agree that this is done, we all agree that this is not done. So things like murder, I guess, you know, generally speaking, apart from the odd deviant here and there, most of us kind of agree murder's not great.
Yeah, yeah.
Being said, I think, I don't know, I suppose even that could be up for debate as far as is there a correlation as far as, I don't know, advancement of societies and increase in murder. I don't know, but because
Mm,
I'm sure you can go back in time and see more murder, you know, less developed
yeah.
society. But aside from that, I think if we look at just things like working, what's considered work, what's considered a good job, what's considered
Mm,
a good home, what's considered, you know, family, this, that, and the other. There's definitely no consensus, you know, as far as there's a standard, and it's a
yeah.
standard that again is old
Mm,
and based on a time that doesn't apply to now. Um, but then I think that's probably where the lack of code comes from, because what happens is you've got these things that are passed down, you know, decade by decade, century by century. They become less and less relevant. People still try and perpetuate it in the current society that they're in, and
yeah.
you can't something like, I don't know, remember to be at home or be back at the cave by sundown because the dinosaurs like to feed at night. You can't then apply
Mm,
that to modern society, you
yeah.
know, because well, where are the dinosaurs? We have none. And
Yeah.
I think that's where things get lost, because you take something old school, take an old rule that works then, maybe even works 10 years afterwards, but especially nowadays where technology and society is changing well, at this rate, every couple of months,
Yeah.
you can't really hold on to anything from the past and see it successfully work its way through modern society. So as far as having like, you know, codes of conduct or codes of behavior or just a way of being. I don't think it's possible for
Yeah.
us to have, because we're all going to be trying to pull on something from the past, but that can't really be applied now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's my next question. Do you feel like to an extent a lot of what we're experiencing with some of the issues and the friction with people trying to, well, just literally just going off the rails or going left for the most part, or just not really being thinkers or leaders in that sense. Do you feel like um the older heads, they have a they have a sharehold in the blame to go around? Do you feel like they're responsible to an extent? And
Yeah.
what in what we see as and call a society today?
Yeah. I mean, okay, so it's not a popular opinion when you, I don't know, you sit around with the elders at family get-togethers and you discuss, well, my generation is your generation's, you know, let's call a
Yeah.
spade a
Yeah, when
spade.
I was your age and
Right.
my time and stuff like that.
And this is the thing, it's just like when you look at what their generation did
Yeah.
and didn't do, but what their generation did directly led to where we are today.
Mm,
There are things that we have done today. If we were to talk about, because essentially what we're doing is we're saying, okay, so who has the most influence on our current society? Who had the most influence? Who's led, you know, influence led to where we are now? And I suppose the problem with
yeah.
that is um, young people don't have the power,
Mm,
and the only young people who do have the power are the young people in politics, and there's
yeah.
none of them, let's face it, because all of the politicians, at least in our country, are old,
Oh,
old
yeah.
people. And their young people, you know, their children, their nephews, their
Mm,
friends, are affected by old uh, rules being enforced in a modern society because they are also still living in that bubble of
mm.
oldness. So, yeah,
So,
so
so hold on to that. I want to ask you one question for what you just said. Do you
Mm.
feel like perhaps there is to a certain extent, there is a situation where old people still have a grasp on the younger generation in a sense where they're not really able to express enough of their
Yeah, and I
beliefs and their what they feel. Do you get what I mean?
mm,
They can't implement their own ideals in terms pertaining to the culture what they want for themselves
yes,
and their
yeah,
future.
yeah, no, absolutely. Because I think if we look at even something like voting, you have to be 18 to vote, but more time you're voting for something that, let's say, if you've got a population of people voting, everyone over 18, a large part of that population isn't going to be around to see half of the changes they're
Mm,
voting to have implemented. But
yeah.
the people on this end of the scale, we are there. We have to live through all of it. So, decisions like Brexit, for instance,
Oh dear.
let's say, well, I'm just saying, like 6 years ago,
Mm,
they said, Brexit, let's do it. Yeah. Think about how many people voted 6 years ago who aren't here today, and not because of any car crash or any horrible thing, but simply died of old age. Just how many people who were 70 last, when it was voting time,
hmm.
died before they got, you know what I mean? This is like, so these are the things that always
Yeah.
bothered me when I was younger, because I always thought that voting really and truly should be 16 and 16 plus,
Yeah.
because young people get to have a say in their future, not just in their future, but also in their standard day to day. And I think the reason they think it's
Yeah.
relevant for people to vote is because it's like, oh, well, usually we're voting about things like, I don't know, taxes or, whatever else, and
Yeah. Yeah.
schools and things that they think aren't relevant to young people. But they miss the point that, well, actually, these things are going to affect me not long from now because we hit
Mm,
18, all of a sudden everything becomes relevant. But you
yeah.
don't get to decide until it's too late, essentially.
That's right.
Will it,
Yeah.
it's a bit silly. And then, yeah, as far as, I'm not going to condone the generation after ours because I
Yeah.
think I see a lot of rebellion there, but I also get it
Mm,
because I think you look at the generation before us,
yeah.
in fact, not the generation before us, if we say the boomers, let's just go straight to the boomers.
Okay.
They messed our generation up. They messed up our ability to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
Um, and as I say, we are their fault, not the other way around. We're a
Mm,
consequence of them, not the other way around.
it's
So,
interesting.
so yeah, sorry, I quite strongly believe that young people are sort of herded into this cage of, well, here's what the rules are going to be, here's the law, here is what you do and don't get.
Yeah.
And they're led this way by a bunch of old people whose it doesn't affect them. The laws and things that they're implementing, the rules and the policies and the changes they make, it doesn't affect them in a negative way. It always impacts the young
Mm,
people, and then what happens? We get to our 30s, 40s, and now we're stressed about mortgage and this, that, and the other. And now we're voting again for something. It's like, okay, now this is going to impact our next 20 years, but
yeah.
it's also impacting the next 50 years of the 18-year-old. It's kind of, I think they sort of fail to see the trickle down effect. Things like,
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
the cost of education, for instance,
Yeah.
just I don't think they realize the impact that had on young people's, well, I mean, you'd say young people's morale in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah. Yeah. I think from what you're saying, what I'm getting is they have this saying and it goes, um, good times, good times breathe weak men. Hard
Mm,
times breathe strong men. Do you get what I
mm,
mean? And
mm,
I feel like maybe it's a situation where, you know, it not necessarily that specific way as the saying goes, but maybe
mm,
a situation where like, hard times, they are our generation before us, or even the ones before that, they maybe had hard times and or maybe let's just go to the previous generation. They had
mm,
hard times. And
mm,
so they overcame them. They paved the way for themselves and they create something that's somewhat tangible. Do you get what I mean
mm.
for us? And perhaps there's I don't know how much you'd agree with it, but perhaps there's a sense of like entitlement in terms of like people
Okay.
actually, our generation in a sense is kind of maybe privileged to the point where they didn't appreciate the struggle from the previous generation, and so
Okay. Okay.
they they failed to kind of try to elevate beyond
Mm.
and excel beyond what the previous generation did. And so now we're at a place where it's almost like perhaps we've taken two steps, taken one step forward and maybe two steps back, or even one step back. But it's almost like, we're not really far from where we were like a decade or 2 decades
Mm.
ago. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a
Okay.
controversial one, but it's almost like, like what went wrong or what
Yeah,
went
so you're saying
right.
they sort
Yeah, I
of
mean,
paved the way for us, and then our generation has not really picked it up, but instead it's kind of asked for more, maybe.
yes, yes.
Yeah. Hmm. I hear it, and I do. I suppose I see it in terms of just things like access, because the access to the things that we have now that, let's say, the generation before us didn't have. Yes, that's definitely something that we are privileged to have that 20 years ago wouldn't be
Okay.
the case. Even things like I don't know,
Social
there are
media.
certain
The thing
well,
about
social
social
media.
media, you can speak to anybody anywhere. Did you?
It's true. No, it's very true. It's very true. We can contact our relatives across seas, across land. They never had that ability.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, even if you bring it down to things like child laws were very different 20 years ago, and they were different 30 years ago, and they were different 60 years ago. So even if we break it down to just a health and safety aspect, we're definitely safer today than
Yeah.
our parents when they were our age.
Totally.
And so I guess there is that level in terms of, yes, there was a big push and there was a big shift um,
Yes.
in that era to pave the way and to set things up so that things would be easier for our generation.
Mm-hmm.
It, and I suppose the reason that I'm sort of on the fence with that is because, by the same token, how do I put it? So they pave the way. They go, here it is. It's gold. And then we come along and we go, wow, that's going to be great. I can't wait till I'm old enough to use it. And then every year, the older we get, they sort of take away bricks from the pavement and go, okay,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, I know I said it was a whole road, but actually now it's just this part of the street. Okay, still good? Cool. Okay, and I said it was a part of the street. Now it's this avenue. Okay, good. Now
Mm-hmm.
it's the alleyway. Now it's that part right there, and you have to pay for it, and you get taxed every time you step on it. It's like
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
they did pave the way, but then every year, at least if we go just by,
Are you
you
saying
know,
the foundations were fickle?
I'm saying the foundations made sense until they didn't make sense anymore. And I guess
Mm.
it made sense because at the time, let's face it, it all comes down to finance at the end of the day. At the time, they weren't worried about giving away things for free because I guess there was not as big a need for it, or there wasn't as big a demand for it, or
Yeah.
things weren't as, people weren't as grubby, let's say.
Mm.
And then I guess what happened is as you give access, you end up with a supply and demand issue because now you're giving people things for free
Mm.
and you're not compensating that with charging. So then you start to charge.
Yeah.
But people who you're charging aren't going to be the same people that originally got it for free.
Yeah.
And I say free, and obviously that's not just free, but that's things like housing. Everyone's heard an old person say, "Oh, I bought my house for 4,000. Oh, I bought my property for 50,000."
Yeah.
It's like, well, yes, but the equivalent of that is what was 50,000 back then is now 500,000 now.
Yeah.
And so even though you provide, oh, here's loads of housing,
Mm.
here's, I don't know, healthcare, here's education, you bring it, the people at the time get to enjoy it,
Yeah.
and then we come along and suddenly there's new, locks on the doors, and there's hoops to jump, and there's taxes, and what's it called, increases in the inflation, and it's never been the same. and not that it would be, because obviously things would naturally go up. But if you look at,
Mm.
and I'm only
You
talking
think
about
there
this
should be a
country,
natural progression in terms of like being better, not, at a
it's not supposed
standstill
to be
or
harder.
reverting backwards. Do you get what I mean? Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah,
supposed to be harder.
it's
Mm.
not supposed to be harder to get the same things that were available 20 years ago.
Mm.
And I think to me that's where I struggle when it comes to, because I understand, I do agree there is a certain privilege that you see among people. It's like, oh, well, this is
Yeah.
supposed to be granted. And I think
But let me just
It's 20 hours.
let me throw a spanner into the works.
Mhm.
Perhaps the way where they made their where they made their success in terms of like paving a way,
Mm.
it was merely to create like a platform so you can have that power when you come to our generation to kind of actually do something, build a foundation, as opposed to like, okay, you're in a better place now, utilize it and be wise with the power that you have. Do you get what I mean? Maybe, maybe
Mm.
we were not at that place where, you know what, they put us in an advanced spot where we can do a lot with what we have. Do you
So
understand?
you
It's
haven't reached that point yet
yeah,
where it's
maybe
going to
we
start to
weren't there
pay
in the
off.
first place.
But then isn't that still a flaw in the system because they got to benefit when they were our age? And
It is, but I think what I'm trying to get is just like you can only do what is possible, can't you? And perhaps it wasn't possible with them, you know?
I think it was possible until they realized it cost too much because the demand for things like, let's say, higher education were much lower 20 years ago. It
Mm,
was only certain, classes. Well, obviously, if we go back in time, it was particularly only higher class people who would seek higher education anyway. But that didn't, not to say it didn't change, but there was definitely still, at least in this country, there was still a sort of zone of what do I call it? Sort of like a boundary of who was, you know, who was going into higher education, who wasn't. And
mm,
then, sorry, I'm losing my words. You
yeah,
get a higher demand
yeah,
for the thing that used to be free. You
yeah.
now can afford to make it free.
Mm,
So they start charging. So they started charging us for the education that was free 20 years ago.
yeah, yeah,
So that's why for me, when I'm talking about this kind of, the flaw in the system, it's like, yeah, you're still giving us access. Yes,
mm,
you've improved. Let's face it, what has improved? Because funding still is very scarce in the areas where it needs to be. And as much as you said, well, maybe certain things weren't possible, but we've seen that when those in charge want things to be possible, they're very
yeah,
possible very quickly. So again, my issue is that, let's say if I break it right down again, the
yeah,
people at the top can afford to not worry about what they do with the rest of society. The people who they do it to were, let's say, 20 years ago.
mm,
They started with something free. They had an
yeah,
opportunity to grow into something that they now get to reap the rewards of.
mm,
We come into it, and by the time we're in our 20s, it costs money. So it's already imbalanced. So then, as far as this privilege is concerned, it's like, well, I don't feel privileged. I feel strained because
all
you're
right.
talking to me about potential that I don't have.
With that being said, right,
But,
let me throw this at you then. So
mm,
what are the chances of us um what are the chances of the next generation that comes after us not being burdened with this situation that we're in? Because
uh,
it seems to me that we're in a situation where that we're most likely going to pass on to them. Do you get me?
yeah, I agree, and I think that's probably one of the things that's even more frustrating because essentially we were sort of sold a dream and then cheated out of the dream,
Yeah.
and we're gonna have kids, and I suppose what you'll see maybe a lot of people our age are doing is desperately trying to get back the dream we were sold.
Yeah.
But what that means is things get pushed, because let's say if the dream was you're going to be able to buy a home after going to university and getting your degree, and you're going to get to go into a job in your field, earn enough money to pay your mortgage.
Yeah.
Not one of those has been easy. If you look at the sort of the vast majority, because we're not talking about the higher class, the people who where money has not really been a problem. We're talking more about the lower middle and working class, right?
Yeah, that's
where let's say our generation, not many of us can afford to buy a home where we were raised. Not many of us can afford to do a job, I don't know, that pays, well, I think the current average in London is 30k. And anyone who lives in London knows that 30k will get you what? Staying at home.
McDonald's.
it's even then McDonald's is getting expensive, and Primark. So in terms of, if we're talking about the ability to create generational wealth, let's say generation before us had that ability, they had the resources, they had the free this, the free that, the lower this, the lower that. I think the difference is if we look at the class and race situation, I would say it was tougher for them then, because people are less concerned with class now, I think, in general. And race is a very different issue to what it was. Still, it's an issue, but very different. So let's say people of color would have been fighting against that. But then you come to our generation, we just about have the ability to, live around on our own. Who can afford to buy a home who's single? Because that's the other thing. The situation we've been placed into forces you to either shack up with a friend, shack up with. Yes, I can.
Yeah, sorry about that, folks. We got cut unexpectedly. The technical issues.
Difficulties. I think we're good now.
But yeah, never mind. Yes. So before you got cut, yes, I think you were about to blame the generation prior to us.
Yes, I was saying that we will not get to pass down, let's say, generational wealth. Well, not saying we won't get to. We're all really, really trying hard to make our own wealth so that we can pass down some kind of generational wealth.
See, just that in general, right? Just that alone, it begs the question though, like, what is generational wealth for someone in our situation? Do you get what I mean? We've been cut off from that, from wealth for such a long time. So,
well, exactly, and I think that kind of adds to at least my frustration, and I'm sure other people's frustration, as far as we're already battling an uphill struggle.
But that brings me back to the question I asked you before this, which was, were they actually in a position of power or did they just try to give us a platform? Yes, or did they just try to give us a platform, which was maybe their real purpose?
Well,
and for us to kind of maybe utilize that to try and elevate, to make that second step for the next generation after us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and if we're going to talk about Black people in particular, is that what we're? Then
I mean, it wasn't, but I guess we kind of led to it. So I guess we might as well have the conversation.
Well, only because I'm thinking, I don't know how much that applies to, well, Black people who've never been in power. We've never had the power, let's say, especially not in this country. And as far as paving and such is concerned, they didn't really have the opportunity to pay anything. That being
Yeah.
said, it's not like there are no black homeowners in this country. So I'm not necessarily saying that it's the same and it's equal and it's, oh, they have the same opportunities. But what I am saying is, I suppose, maybe I'm not necessarily blaming that generation, but I'm saying
Mhm.
the politics that occurred during that time
Yeah.
are to blame for where we are today. The social circumstances of that time, I suppose, would be maybe one of the reasons why there were a lot of black people who weren't able to purchase homes. Social and economic reasons why they weren't
Mhm.
able to own something to be able to pass down to us. Um,
Yeah.
and then I suppose the other thing, ownership, education. Yeah, I suppose that would have been a social thing as well, as far as being pushed towards different subjects. Because I know that in this country, at least, God, I'm trying to remember now. I think it was in the 70s or something. I'm trying to remember when they stopped doing the "you're dumb, you're smart" schools, which were that's how I would sort of simplify it. But it was the God, I can't remember the name of the stinking school is, but there was the schools for those, let's say, who were more hands-on, more practical, and there were the schools for, let's say, the more intellectual. Cannot for the life of me remember what they were called, but those are the schools. And I can't remember when they stopped doing them either. My brain is not working today, so work with me. But
Mm.
black people we know in this country were pushed towards certain subjects. We know they were pushed away from others. We know that they were more inclined to end up only able to do certain subjects and not others. So
Yeah.
I know that it was rigged against us in that sense. And I know that in terms of, let's say, our
Mm.
community and our previous generation doing something for our generation, I know that that's not their fault. So when I'm talking about that generation, I think I'm speaking more in general, that the
Yeah.
general generation kind of messed up our general generation. But in terms of did our community mess us up, I think they didn't have a chance to do, not all of them anyway, because like I said, I know that it varies across
Yeah.
classes, but they weren't in the same position as, let's say, their white counterparts. So
Mm.
I think in general, I'm mostly blaming the politics of that time, of their generation, and maybe just being bitter, I say,
Yeah.
that they had access to things like education for free, and not all of them chose to do it. But again, I also know that's more social than
Yeah.
economic, because again, if education is free, higher education, um, and you have access to things like foundation colleges and things that will allow you to go on to university, then
Yeah.
the only reason for not going would be something, let's say, social. So whether that's because you have kids that you can't, leave, or whether because you have family who don't value education, or whatever it is, it won't be something economic, because the money isn't a factor in that scenario. It's free.
However, I mean, we've seen it time and time again. Education, yes, is feasible to accomplish it, but doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make you um more viable for the market. To actually say I'm eligible to go out there and just get a job like that.
No, and
It doesn't seem to be. It's basically just not that black and white. So I think we just have to be a bit careful with that one.
yeah, but I don't think I don't think that's not necessarily the point I'm trying to make as far as getting an education. I suppose what I'm saying is, how do I put it? Having a higher education doesn't guarantee you a job, but it puts you in a different position to those without. At least back then it definitely did. Nowadays we have things like Instagram models and YouTubers. So education is meaning less and less and less in the scheme of making money. But back then, 20 years ago, having an education did lead to more money in some general scheme. In terms of, if you looked at who was earning higher than others, you would see a
Yeah,
general, not massive, not talking tens and thousands,
yeah,
but a general higher earning. average in higher education educated people than non-education higher education educated people.
Okay, I have a question for you. Would you say having an education is synonymous to having a trade? Because we know there's a slight difference there. Because you can have a trade and don't necessarily have gone to university. Do you get
Mm.
what I mean?
And are you talking
So
about someone who's successful in what they do without having had higher education?
yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah. No, because this is the thing. I'm not necessarily talking about not being able to be successful without higher education. What I'm
hmm
saying is 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago as well, there was
yeah,
a distinct difference in those who were earning. And the people who were earning, let's say, as much as someone with a higher education, they didn't get there easily. It wasn't
yeah,
nowadays, and I hate to say it, but maybe this is where I feel like the next generation are a little bit at an advantage where they have options to make money now at a level that people with higher education don't have. So 20, 30 years ago,
mm,
you needed that higher education. And if you didn't have it, you would have to graft your life to try and make that same money. Now, one viral video will make you that money, you know? And I think that's the part where I struggle
yeah,
because
mm,
it's not necessarily, how do I put it? It's not that education equaled money, but it definitely it had a bigger standing in society back then, and it meant more in society back then, even though it meant less comparatively to their generation prior, because before
yeah,
that, having an education was everything, and over
hmm
time it has dwindled. But if we compare 30 years ago to now, having a higher education made a difference. Not a massive one. It didn't put you at the front. You still didn't get hired immediately, but you definitely were in a different position to those without.
But did it make enough of a difference to say that, having an education would have, like, say more people than less having an education, it didn't necessarily are you saying that would make a significant change to the position that we're in now in terms of like handing over to the next generation, where we would have been more favorable and advantageous because of them making the right choice and being more cognizant of what the value of education would be at the
I,
time,
yeah, I
as
do.
opposed to resulting in what we have now, which because they didn't see that value in
Yeah,
education.
I do believe that unfortunately the way that this country is rigged, it's rigged to want to put us at the bottom regardless, as black people.
Mm.
They turn up their
Yeah.
nose at those of us with PhDs. They turn their nose up at those of us from Oxford.
Mm.
So those of us without, what chance did we have? Who are you in the scheme of you're fighting against the black person who does come from a rich family, and that black
Yeah.
person still isn't getting chosen for that promotion or for the higher paying job that they deserve with the education they have.
Mm.
So
But I just maybe I'm coming from a different space where it's almost like I've always felt to an extent that, you know, in someone in our position, you'd most likely have to find a way outside of the system as opposed to in the system,
you can,
where it's almost it's rigged. It's somewhat rigged with booby traps and obstructive devices, where systemic devices, where it's almost like, you know what, you're gonna be labored for pretty much the majority of your life, depending on what you choose. And it's always going to affect the outcome of what you're looking for. So, whereas where if you create a path for yourself, you be somewhat in so much more of a greater have a greater chance to make it to where you want to go, and to be more successful in a life that you can be happy with. Do you get what I mean?
I hear you, but I think that's fairly relative because I think if we look at, if you look at the broader scheme, or if we look at the horrible, horrible statistics that point out, okay, well, I don't know, let's say black families, black single parent families are more likely to have children who go to prison or children who do this or that. And, those
Mm,
unfortunately, even if they are, I don't know, even if they're not a full consensus, a full census of this entire population in the UK, it's still, it leans a lot to the side of those without education struggle. So I'm not saying that
Mm.
people with education don't make it and don't get to pave the way, and that if you're able to do that, that's not a good thing, because obviously I think everyone wants to do that really and truly. No one wants to be part of a system that is actively trying to oppress you and actively
Mm.
wants to be lower than you're supposed to be. But if you look at things in terms of, you think so, for the people who weren't able to, I don't know, pave a way doing something they're skilled in, or who couldn't really think outside the box and go, okay, what could I start by myself? Because starting a business isn't an easy thing to do, if that's where we're going with it.
It's
Starting a business,
not. It's not.
it's not easy.
It's
It's
not.
not something that everyone chooses to do. Some people just want an easy life. They just want to just bring my money, let me do my 9 to 5, go work, come back,
Mm.
earn and live. That's, some people just want
So
that.
yeah, I mean, I get where you're coming from in terms of like, you know what, like you said, some people want to be easy and some people want to be business minded and do it for themselves. Be like, just a minute. Can you see me?
Yeah. Did you disappear?
Yes, my screen just zip. Yeah, so some people want to do it for themselves, and
Hmm.
some people want to go through a system anyway.
Hmm.
Um, I do get the point that you're saying, you know what, with an education, you can do either way, and you'd be better off with that whole situation. But I had to ask that question for sure. I don't think we two disagree, but at
Hmm.
the same time, I just feel like some in certain situations or in certain cases, education might be overrated.
I agree that it can be overrated, and I suppose the reason I do sometimes feel it's overrated is it depends on what you're studying, why you're doing it, and where you're
Yeah.
thinking to go with it. Because I think a lot of the one of the biggest problems I think with higher education at the very least is you've got a bunch of people going to university just because they think they're supposed to go, and
Mm,
then it's like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to go to uni. But then if you go to uni, you do the most useless degree on the planet, because these days, remember back then, they only had a certain amount of, subjects. Not saying they, but let's say if they had 500 then, they've got 5,000 now. Like you can study just about anything.
yeah.
You can study refrigerators at university if you want to, and that's only bloody useful. You plan to go and
Yeah.
service refrigerators for the rest of your life. So in that sense, I
Yeah.
think, because if you know you're born into, let's say, a family business, you've
Mm,
got dressmakers as family. Everyone's a tailor. Everyone is out. Business is already there. All you have to do is take it over. So if you
yeah.
decide to go and do a dressmaking degree, it's
Hmm.
helpful because I guess it shows credentials that yes, I can do this, but it's not really relevant in the scheme of things if you know you're going to inherit the family business anyway. You've already learned everything you need to know skill wise and knowledge wise anyway. Then no, education in that sense isn't relevant to you because the money will come either way. Now, if you
Yeah.
want education just because you want to go to, because the other thing that I don't believe university is just for education. I believe university specifically is part of an experience in itself, but that's a slightly different topic.
I agree with that. I
But
would agree with that.
yeah, but if you're going to university to okay, I just want to go and I want to get this education so I have just so I can say I got the education, even though you know you've got this family business to rely on, then it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
But at least when it was free, it didn't cost you to do that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it can't hurt you to have the degree.
Mm,
Having the degree is only painful when you realize you studied the wrong degree. But if you studied the right
mm,
degree and 20 years down the line you suddenly meet someone, because that's the other thing that people miss, is that having higher education specifically opens doors that not having it makes it harder for you to get through that track.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
I would agree with that as well. So
opportunity.
would you say, speaking of just kind of speaking of what you just said,
Hmm.
it's almost like people from the past or speaking of just like the previous generation, it's almost like this these ideals, it wasn't a thing that maybe they didn't experience enough to
Mm,
pass on,
mm.
so people know better, or it was a thing where they didn't think to pass it on, or
I,
even, do you get what I mean? Like
I think it's a
all the
combination.
little variables. Um, it's either they were privy to it and they chose not to give it, or they weren't because they choose not to investigate or explore. Do you get what I
Mm,
mean? So in a
maybe.
sense, it still comes back to the same situation where we're asking, is this morality even not that does value, the values, are there such thing as old school values anyway anymore? Because it's almost like, to me, the the generation that's supposed to pass on these values, and maybe not necessarily the negative ones, that ones that it doesn't really do much for you, but the empowering ones, and the ones that they give you knowledge, they give you substance to your person. Do you get what
Mm.
I mean? It's almost like they kept that to themselves in a sense.
Well, okay, so hold on. So on that then, let me sort of throw back
Mm,
a question because I think when we're talking about the morals, so the morals and values and ideas that I've been discussing up until now were pertaining
mm,
to mostly economics and just general politics. But if we were to
yeah.
take that and put that in a society where it's, let's say, where it isn't a rat race, so not a city,
Mm,
but another, one of the shires in England somewhere, where
yeah.
it's community based, do you feel like those old school values would have more value in those
Mm,
areas? Because I think modern day life seems to be more prevalent in cities. That's just my opinion, no fact involved there, just
yeah.
as far as I can see, and only based on the fact that cities tend to move in a certain way in terms of moving away from community,
Mm,
moving away from family, moving away from social politics, whereas
yeah.
smaller villages tend to keep that longer, let's say. So in
Yeah.
terms of these old values, it might be that in cities, the traditional values are losing their place, they're losing their relevance, but that potentially in these smaller places, they're still
Hmm.
being implemented and they're still relevant and they're still valued, because they're still being used on a day-to-day basis. I wonder.
I mean, I think one could argue that, but with these things, it's kind of like, if you're the new generation, or even not in essence our generation, or even a generation to come, I just feel like when you are kind of like, if you should be able to understand your environment, your surroundings
Mm.
enough to be cognizant of what it takes to
Mm.
kind of evolve those values. Do you get what I mean? And make it reflect your times in a sense. Because I feel like in certain cases, a lot of the things that we probably could learn could probably be traced back 1,000 years ago.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just that they evolve with the time, they adapt with the times. And so I'm not necessarily saying that, it's a necessary evil, but it was just food for thought, and I thought to myself, hmm, you know,
Yeah, I think.
what were the choices that were made at the time,
Mm,
was think when they were thinking about who's coming next, and what would they need in
mm,
their skill set,
mm.
you know. But yeah, it's interesting. It's I thought it was interesting to bring up.
I mean,
But yeah, I think we'll end it there. We'll run out of time. So Jade, do you have anything you wanna broadcast, speak on, let the people know?
no, not that I can think of.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I did think of something.
Go on.
I have an Instagram page. It wouldn't be terrible if people were to follow it. It's that first nails underscore London. Put it on the.
I think you froze.
Ah, well, that's rude. Ugh,
Are
ugh,
you back?
ugh. I can hear you. Right, oh, yeah, I'm back. There you are. Oh, rude. Oh, fine. Guess I won't do any promotion then.
It's sorry, I'm back. I'm back. What were you saying?
It's
I
fine.
literally missed everything.
It cut out. I was just saying I have an Instagram page. It's butt first nails underscore London on Instagram, but I'll put the link on there somewhere. But yes, that's all I was trying to say before it so rudely cut me off. Oh,
Okay, 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 boss. And I have an Instagram page. You can find me at Poultry Journal. That's www.instagram.com/PO3TRYJOURNAL Poultry Journal. And WordPress, word, that's dreamimagine.express. Yeah, that's it basically. And just click on the link or just put it in your L and yeah, not hard to find, or just search for me in Google. Uh, I've noticed that that works these days. Also on Amazon, got Poetry Journal, Growing Pains available. My first ever publishing poetry journal, Dream Imagine Express. I got Into the Abyss, the three series, 3 volumes out right now, and working off some new things. But for now, yeah, just anybody have any questions or would like to get in contact. Um, I'm very frequent on Instagram, so be sure to reach out. Always welcome questions and disagreements.
obviously,
So with that, sorry.
oh, your t-shirt again. Show the people the t-shirt again.
Oh, the t-shirt. Oh, you like the t-shirt. There it is. There it is.
Yeah, yeah. There you go.
Yep, that's the t-shirt right there. All right, Jade.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for spending some time, and
These my boys.
I guess we'll see you soon. All right,
Him.
take care. Bye bye.
Bye.